It is entirely possible that on the morning of November 4th, nobody will be able to tell you who runs this damn country. Not because any of the races will be close, but because of what happened at the Supreme Court on Monday. A 6-3, unsigned, no explanation, just posting it on the emergency docket. This ruling, with the court clearing the way for Donald Trump's March executive order on mail-in voting to move forward while the lawsuits keep going. Of course, the 3 liberal justices dissented because they know what's at stake here. But the court pointedly did not rule on whether any of it is legal. That is so important to note here, because this can allow the lawsuits to keep going. But what does this order actually do? Well, it tells the Department of Homeland Security to go ahead and build those lists of who it believes is eligible to vote, state by state. It tells the Postal Service to deliver mail ballots only to people on those lists. And it requires certain barcodes on the ballot envelopes. So let me get this straight. Markwayne Mullin's Homeland Security decides who's on the list, and we know that their lists are already horribly inaccurate. Your post office decides whose ballot gets delivered. And neither of those agencies has ever run an election because under the Constitution, neither of them is allowed to. That's up to the states and the Congress. It's in Article 1. And a federal judge in Massachusetts said exactly that back in June, that the president has overstepped and that the Postal Service has zero legal authority over mail-in voting. An appeals court agreed with that judge. That judge blocked Donald Trump's efforts with mail-in voting nationwide. 23 states and the District of Columbia sued. Dozens of state and local election officials have filed papers begging the justices to leave that executive order frozen because they're already printing their ballots. The words of these people allowing changes this big, this close to the election would be extreme. And yet 6 justices said, sure, why not? And here's the funny part, and I'm using that loosely. None of this may even work. The government's own Solicitor General told the court in July that to be ready for November, the agencies would have to start implementing in early to mid-August. Well, here we are. It's late August. An election scholar at Notre Dame said flatly that everyone agrees that this cannot happen for 2026 because, quote, the logistics are so horrific. And an NPR report notes that the Postal Service is still blocked nationwide under a separate ruling from the 11th Circuit. So we have 2 federal orders pointing in opposite directions, weeks before your ballots go in the mail. But that's the point here. The ballots aren't what's at issue. What Donald Trump wants is the fog, the mess, the confusion, everyone pointing in different directions. And I've got to ask you guys, are you voting by mail this year? Do you know what your state's request deadline is off the top of your head? And have you checked your registration lately? That's your homework. And again, tell somebody in the comments that you did it or your tips for doing it. And if you haven't already, sort out your ID. Assume that your ID is not enough. Go to your state, go to your local government right now and get your ID sorted out. And if you have a passport, bring it to the polls with you. Because here's what's actually happening. This is a man whose approval rating sits at, depending on which poll, anywhere from 30 to 39%, and it has a risk of going down below 30. And his disapproval is somewhere 57 or up. So he's at least 17.5 points underwater if you're looking at the real clear average, and we know that that kind of points to the right. If you look at Nate Silver's averages, he's 19.5 underwater, which he's almost at the worst number of his entire presidency. Then, if you compare that to a generic ballot, Democrats are up 6.4%. Silver's models have them clear favorites to take the House, and they might take the Senate too. Republicans are so sure that they may lose this that they've run a mid-decade redistricting operation across the country to build themselves that cushion, and they still will probably lose if this were a fair fight. But it's not a fair fight, because the party that expects to lose has spent this year doing 3 things. Again, redrawing the maps, rewriting who gets to vote, and now getting the Supreme Court to unfreeze all of the BS election executive orders just a few weeks out. And remember, Donald Trump, with all of his bluster, votes by mail in Florida. This year, he's done it twice. He's used the method that he calls fraud in the state he moved to while telling you it's rigged. A Brookings study found that roughly 4 cases of fraud out of every 10 million mail-in ballots. 4. You are more likely to be struck by lightning while being attacked by a shark. And I've been in that water with sharks and lightning. And here I am. About 30% of all ballots back in 2024 came in by mail from both parties. Your grandmother out in Milton votes by mail. Deployed soldiers vote by mail. This isn't a Democrat thing. It's not a Republican thing. It is a Tuesday in November thing. Again, 3 things you can do. Make sure your ID is sorted out with Real ID or whatever it is that you've got to do. Check it today. Check your registration status today. And if you have to vote by mail, make sure you request your ballot the first day you get it. Make sure you send it back the first day you can, and track it every step of the way. And I want you to picture November 4th. House control coming down to a handful of districts. And somewhere in there, a batch of mail-in ballots got mail delayed or got flagged against this BS DHS list or arrived without the right barcodes. What happens then? Hit that notification button, check your registration, request your ballots early, and do not let anyone tell you in November that the confusion wasn't on purpose.